In the heart of El Salvador, where the farmlands of Brazil blend with the silence of the night, the story of Valdemir Heckler turned into a tragedy on November 14, 2022. A tragedy rooted in the complexities of the heart and bank accounts. Valdemir, father of two sons, Jonathan and Matthias, from his first marriage to Jeanette, was a man standing on the border of two lives. Life background and emotional gap. Valdemir Heckler's life has always been marked by deep dualities. For years, he struggled to establish a fragile balance between his past family obligations and the passion of his new relationship. The coldness between him and Jeanette, his first wife, had become a bitter reality after the entry of Claudia Fernandez Tabarez into his life. After years of secret relationships, Valdemir had finally chosen Claudia as his second wife. That night, inside those walls, love, jealousy, and fear mixed in a way that led to something unthinkable. A choice was made, a decision that wouldn't just break a marriage, but would shatter an entire family. What really happened in that house on November 14th? And how did a family story turn into one of betrayal and tragedy? Dear followers of the SickMind channel, thank you for choosing this video. Please like the video to support the channel. And at the end of the story, share your opinion about this story with us in the comments. Stay with us to hear the rest of the story. He grew up in a large family, learning early the value of responsibility and hard work. By the time he reached adulthood, Valdemir was known in his community as a kind and dependable man. He earned a living as a driver and also ran a small livestock business, raising cattle in the countryside. Life seemed stable. He was married to Jeanette, a woman he loved deeply, and together they had built a family with two sons, Jonathan and Matthias. For a while, their home reflected the image of happiness. But when Matthias is barely a year old, that picture was shattered. Valdemir confessed to Jeanette that he had another relationship and another child. The woman was Claudia Fernandez Tabarez, a former teacher who had once worked with dairy cattle. She had given birth to a daughter, Gabriela, just months after Matthias was born. The revelation devastated Jeanette. The betrayal cut deep. And for a time, she didn't know how to process the truth. But despite her pain, she chose not to pursue a divorce, holding on to the hope that Valdemir would one day abandon his double life and return fully to their home. In the meantime, Valdemir moved in for a time with Claudia to care for their baby daughter. Claudia, leaving her work behind, devoted herself to raising Gabriela. The situation grew even more complicated because the children themselves began to bond. Gabriela, as she grew, often visited Jonathan and Matthias. The siblings played together, creating innocent connections that contrasted with the tension between the adults. For Jeanette, however, life became a daily struggle. Claudia refused to let the family find peace. She followed them on the streets, spied on their movements, and constantly disrupted their routine. Even at family gatherings, Claudia's presence hovered like a shadow. On one occasion, as Valdemir drove Jeanette and their children to her mother's birthday party, Claudia appeared in her car, trailing them closely. The pursuit was so unsettling that Jeanette felt forced to hide in her own husband's vehicle to avoid being seen. For miles, Claudia shifted her car's position, ensuring she never lost sight of them. Only after a long stretch of tense driving did they finally manage to lose her. Jeanette would later describe it as an episode that bordered on madness. The confrontations didn't stop there. Claudia showed up at private homes where Valdemir and Jeanette tried to spend quiet evenings with friends, On more than one occasion, her sudden arrival forced Valdemir into hiding to avoid scandal. Her obsession with controlling him grew stronger, and she could not accept the fact that he continued to see Jeanette, the woman she saw as her rival. The harassment even extended into their most private spaces. Claudia called their home relentlessly, taking advantage of the fact that caller ID was not yet common. Anyone who picked up the phone, including Jeanette's mother, was met with threats, mockery, and cruel words. Claudia boasted about her relationship with Valdemir and demeaned Jeanette, claiming she was only useful for housework and that her husband felt disgust toward her. Yet, according to Jeanette, those words never matched the reality. She lived with him. Eventually, the strain became unbearable. Exhausted and unable to tolerate the constant intrusion, Jeanette made a heartbreaking decision. She gathered Valdemir's belongings and left them at Claudia's door, effectively forcing him to leave their home. From that day forward, Valdemir lived with Claudia. Still, his ties to his sons remained. Jonathan and Matthias, growing into their teenage years, continued to see their father regularly. They shared outings, family meals, and moments that carried a sense of normalcy despite the turmoil between adults. Jonathan and Matthias, growing into their teenage years, continued to see their father regularly. They shared outings, family meals, and moments that carried a sense of normalcy despite the turmoil between adults. Jeanette herself visited from time to time, and though the circumstances were strained, Valdemir always treated her with respect. Financially and emotionally, he continued to provide for his children, ensuring they never lacked support. As the years passed, the fractured family found a delicate balance. On certain weekends, they would even gather together for barbecues and celebrations. And in those moments, Valdemir's jovial spirit lit up the room. Known for his humor and easy laugh, he seemed to bring joy wherever he went. Jonathan built a family of his own and, like his younger brother, visited his father about once a month. Gabriella, however, chose a different path. When she turned 18, she moved out on her own. Her bond with her father grew distant, though she remained close to her mother, Claudia. By mid-2022, after decades of complications, Valdemir and Claudia finally formalized their relationship in marriage. Around this time, Valdemir was dealing with another profound change: the death of his father. The loss was heavy, and the division of inherited land among his siblings created fresh tensions within the extended family. Some assets and money were not directly under his name, but were managed through his sons and close associates. Despite the difficulties, Valdemir maintained a steady income as a driver, collected a pension, and continued with his livestock activities. He dreamed of investing his inheritance in more land and hoped to secure a future for his children. In early November of 2022, Jonathan, his wife, and their 3 young children visited the home where Valdemir now lived with Claudia. Despite Jonathan's lingering mistrust toward his father's new wife, whom he saw as strict and controlling, he kept relations cordial, choosing not to avoid her, but to share family moments when necessary. That weekend, friends of the couple also joined the gathering. The atmosphere appeared calm, almost deceptively normal. The family laughed, ate together, and shared stories deep into the night. Jonathan and his family even decided to spend the night there. But the following week, Matthias and Jonathan noticed that their father had gone unusually quiet. By Tuesday, November 15, 2022, concern grew into alarm. Valdemir failed to show up for work, a man who had always been punctual and responsible. His colleagues, unsettled by his absence, reached out to Claudia to ask if something had happened. Her answer was unexpected. She didn't know where he was. Within hours, she reported him missing to the local police. The news didn't come to Jeanette and her sons directly. Instead, a family acquaintance contacted them with the troubling update. For Jonathan, panic set in quickly. He feared his father might have fainted or suffered an accident while working in the fields. The family rushed to search the rural areas he often visited, but hours of effort led nowhere. Amid the uncertainty, rumors began to circulate through the community. Some whispered that Valdemir might have taken his own life, but his family firmly rejected the idea. They knew him as a cheerful man, full of plans and dreams for the future. He had financial stability, livestock to manage, and, most importantly, children he adored. Suicide, they insisted, was unthinkable. What seemed more plausible was that he had chosen to leave home temporarily, perhaps to escape mounting tensions with Claudia or to make a dramatic point. But no one could imagine the grim reality that was slowly coming to light. Jonathan and his wife decided to set aside their doubts and visit Claudia, hoping to support her in the search. That evening, the atmosphere around Claudia's home was already tense. Police cars, firefighters, and neighbors crowded the area, combing the surroundings for any sign of Valdemir. Jonathan searched his father's phone, hoping to find a clue in his messages. Nothing explained his sudden disappearance. Claudia told those present that the previous weekend had been ordinary. She said they had eaten pizza with friends and spent Sunday together peacefully. According to her, nothing unusual had happened. To everyone listening, it sounded like a comforting version of events. But small details soon began to raise questions. That very night, Jonathan and his wife decided to stay in the house with Claudia. She refused to sleep in her bedroom, instead choosing to spend the night on the living room sofa. She claimed it was so she could be awake if her husband returned. From her spot, however, she had a clear view of the refrigerator. When Jonathan approached it for a glass of water, Claudia's reaction was strangely interested, as if the simple act of opening the fridge unsettled her. Jonathan dismissed it in the moment, attributing her behavior to stress and grief. Yet, in the following days, Claudia remained cautiously protective of that refrigerator. She wouldn't allow anyone else to open it, insisting on being the only one to hand out food to the many volunteers helping with the search. On Saturday, November 19th, 3 days after Claudia had filed the missing person report, she was called to the police station to provide a formal statement. Investigators did not yet view her as a suspect, but given her closeness to Valdemir, questioning her was inevitable. During the interview, officers couldn't help but notice visible injuries on her body. They looked like marks from some sort of struggle. When asked about them, Claudia agreed to undergo a forensic examination, but soon after leaving the station, she disappeared. Almost at the same time, the investigation took a startling new direction. A neighbor approached the authorities with a detail that would prove crucial. Something strange, she recalled an incident 2 weeks before when Valdemir had slapped her in public, an episode she claimed was the breaking point. On the night of the killing, she said, he had forbidden her from going out with coworkers to a New Year's celebration, again asserting his control. In her version, the murder was not premeditated revenge, but a desperate act of survival. Afterward, she told investigators, she felt something she had not felt in years: freedom. Her defense attorney echoed this narrative, portraying her as a woman subjected to years of psychological and physical abuse. In front of television cameras, Claudia repeated the same message. It had been him or her, and she had no choice. But the evidence told a different story. The marks on her body, the inconsistencies in her testimony, and above all, the horrifying concealment of the body in the freezer painted a far more sinister picture. Authorities charged Claudia, then 40 years old, with aggravated homicide, concealment of a corpse, and making false statements. As her face appeared across news portals and flooded social media feeds, the case sparked a national debate in Brazil about domestic violence, mental health, and the blurred lines between victimhood and responsibility. For Valdemir's family, however, no explanation could soften the blow. The discovery created an irreversible fracture in their lives. Jonathan, in particular, was haunted by one image. During those frantic days of searching, when he and his wife had stayed in Claudia's house, she had insisted on serving food herself. She never let anyone else open the freezer. At the time, he thought it was an odd habit, but nothing more. Now, with the truth revealed, he cannot stop replaying the scene in his mind. While volunteers gathered in the house to help, Claudia had walked calmly to the refrigerator, pulling out meals from the very place where her father lay hidden, frozen in silence. For Gabriella, the revelation was unbearable. She had lost her father in the most unimaginable way, and at the same time, the woman accused of killing him was her own mother. Shock mixed with loyalty. Despite the horror, despite the accusations, she tried to stand by Claudia, clinging to the only parent she had left. Jeanette, Jonathan, and Matthias understood that Gabriella was facing the greatest loss of all. Whatever their own grief, they could not ignore that she was a young woman suddenly left without a father and with a mother in custody. Claudia, however, maintained her position. She told investigators that she had acted to protect her daughter. She claimed that Valdemir had been jealous of the bond she shared with Gabriella and that the young woman's decision to move away from home had been motivated by the toxic environment created by her father. Meanwhile, the practicalities of death unfolded in slow motion. The grim process of defrosting Valdemir's body took several days. His wake had to be delayed, forcing relatives to endure a drawn-out agony. The tragedy of Valdemir Heckler is, above all, a testament to the bitter truth that where financial interests and intense emotions intertwine, the line between love, betrayal, and crime becomes dangerously thin. His disappearance on the night of November 14, 2022, has left a hole in the heart of El Serdipolis, a hole filled by the silence of the missing truck and the unresolved expectations of the family. The search continues, but as time passes, the hope of finding the truth fades, and the case gradually becomes an eternal family secret. Was adamant that Valdemir never physically abused Claudia, and she described him as a man who always provided for his family. Other disturbing details emerged. Valdemir kept large amounts of cash at home, money he intended to use to buy a new plot of land. Friends testified that he had saved between $38,000 and $50,000 at the time. One of his brothers even claimed to have seen the money with his own eyes. In addition, Valdemir often deposited sums into accounts belonging to relatives or trusted acquaintances. These revelations fueled speculation that Claudia's motives may not have been simply fear or survival. Family members suggested that Claudia may not have planned the crime precisely, but rather had cultivated the idea over time, waiting for the right moment. They believe she acted before Valdemir could install new security cameras in their home, cameras that could have restricted her movements and perhaps exposed her behavior. In August 2023, the case came back into the public eye when a court in Santa Catalina granted Claudia conditional release under electronic monitoring. She was allowed to work during the day in a construction factory and at night as a cook in a restaurant while she awaited trial. The decision angered many who saw it as a miscarriage of justice. However, shortly after, the Supreme Court of Justice overturned the sentence, citing the gravity of the crime, the concealment of the body, and her attempt to mislead investigators. Claudia was once again placed in preventative detention. Her lawyer, without hesitation, continued to defend her under a possible plea agreement, promising to collect fees only if she was acquitted. He publicly expressed confidence that Claudia had complete confidence in his work. So far, no trial date has been set. The Valdemir Heckler case is one of the most shocking in recent Brazilian history. For Voldemort's loved ones, the tragedy left a permanent scar. The man they loved and relied on was gone, hiding in a place no one could have imagined, while the woman he claimed to love most was accused of ending Lynn's life and the last month of her life at 6 a.m. And so, the ultimate question hangs in the air. Was Claudia truly a victim who had been abused for years? Or was this the calculated act of someone consumed by control and resentment? What justice does such a crime deserve? And will Brazil really carry it out? Thank you for listening to SickMind. If you are interested in crime mysteries from around the world, follow our channel. Subscribe now for more exciting investigations.